faithfully sharing value, decoding great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally here with the Book Talk. Today is Zhangyuan Festival, commonly known as Ghost Festival. But today we won't talk about ghosts, only about spirits. The book we're interpreting for you today is called Speaking of Spirits. People often say ghosts and spirits, but do you think they're the same thing? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. In the author Luan Bakun's view, ghosts and spirits aren't the same. Ghosts are those fully dead and judged by Yan Wang in the underworld, while spirits are in a limbo state. One step forward to ghosthood, one step back to being alive and kicking. So, why are there these neither dead nor alive states in underworld tales? As for spirits that are neither human nor ghost, this book will answer that question for you. The author, Luan Balkun, is hailed as the top contemporary expert on ghost lore. He was a publishing editor who loved reading ghost stories like Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio and In Search of the Supernatural since childhood. Since the 1980s, he's collected materials on Chinese traditional culture and underworld themes, ghosts, hell, the afterlife, and made excerpts. Reportedly, he compiled over 2 million words from dynastic anecdotal novels, supernatural stories, and academic works, leading to several books on underworld culture, including this one. Besides Speaking of Spirits, Sally's book talk covered his other work, Musing on Poetry and Discussing Ghosts, which talks about soul departure, capture, and return. Now, I'll use these 3 key terms to unpack the book's main ideas for you. The first key term is soul departure. Soul departure means the spirit leaves the body, or the soul sheds its shell. Usually when a person dies, the spirit detaches from the body. But in Chinese folk stories, there are also living people. Yet, when the spirit has already left, what's that about? The first way for a living person to experience soul departure is through dreaming. Dream soul stories fall into 2 types. One, where the dream-shed soul parasitizes another species, leading to wild adventures. In the Tang Dynasty's sequel to Strange Tales, there's a story about an official named Shui Wei from Sichuan. He fell ill, was unconscious for over 20 days, suddenly sighed deeply, and sat up. Right, a servant nearby said. Go see if my colleagues are eating sashimi. If so, tell them to come quickly and hear something strange. The servant ran off, and indeed it was so. The colleagues followed him back. Wei Shui said, Is the fisher eating the one that guarded the gate? Zhangbi happened to say, Exactly, yes. Shui asked him, When you bought the fish, did the fisherman hide a big fish and only give you small ones, but you found it and searched it out from the reeds? Did you bring the big fish back to the yamen and hand it over to the kitchen's Wang Shiliang or something? Zhang Bi said, Exactly. Everyone was surprised and asked Shu Wei, How do you know? You who were lying in bed for over 20 days almost dying. Shu Wei said, The big fish you killed was me. He recounted how, during his illness, he dreamed that his soul turned into a fish in the deep sea, swimming freely every day in the 3 rivers and 5 lakes, feeling utterly content. One evening, suddenly feeling hungry, he swallowed the fisherman's bait. Only when placed on the chopping board and having his fish head chopped off did he wake up from the dream. Besides turning into a fish, he could also transform into other flowers, birds, insects, or beasts, capable of anything. These stories of dream souls leaving the body, wherever the imagination reaches, are nothing but a longing for a state of freedom and ease that's usually unattainable. Another type of dream soul story is mostly related to love, with the most representative being the soul of the heroine Zheng Qianyang in the tale of the disembodied soul. She eloped with her lover to Chengdu, bore 2 sons in 5 years, but her body remained ill at home. Only when she missed her family too much and woke from the great dream did her soul return, happily ending well. In these love stories, the spirits, due to reasons like propriety and social status, often have love that's unacceptable to society, so they fall ill from longing. And in illness, their dream souls leave, shedding constraints to live freely with their lovers. These two types of dream soul stories actually share the same core. In dreams, the soul can temporarily escape the body's constraints, creating peace from the heart, becoming truly free. The second way for a living person's soul to leave is more violent, usually caused by some accident or mishap leading to separation of form and spirit. So, this type of soul departure is also called soul loss, like in the phrase lost soul, a word that shows passivity and helplessness. These soul loss stories were likely created by folk traditions to explain sudden dementia, coma, or madness. For example, after being frightened, people might appear absent-minded, demented, or comatose. Unable to understand, people believed that person's soul had wandered off. Historical storytelling. Historical records mention an anecdote from Emperor Taoi's reign. A eunuch sentenced to death for poor cleaning while kneeling for execution had an identical double standing before him, astonishing spectators. When the emperor suddenly pardoned him, people saw the standing figure merge back into the kneeling eunuch. Turns out it was the eunuch's soul, frightened out of his body. Later, the concept of soul loss was exploited by unscrupulous charlatans as a livelihood scheme. Over time, traditions like soul calling, witchcraft became widespread during Mingqing era, claiming to summon living souls. For instance, if someone answered when their name was called unexpectedly on the road, their soul might be stolen. Soul calling served two purposes. One targeted the physical body. The soulless body, dazed, would be led to remote areas and robbed of valuables. Victims waking from sneak attacks with stolen belongings believed they'd been soul called. The other targeted the soul itself, trapping it to extort the family. If demands weren't met, the soul owner would remain demented for life. For example, when news spread of someone suddenly acting insane, so-called shamans would soon arrive to extort money. Folk witchcraft claimed not only to summon souls away, but also to recall lost souls, known as soul summoning. Qing dynasty records described Yin County's custom. For chronic mental illness, shamans performed soul summoning with ritual animals and the patient's clothes wrapped on a rooster. Clothes guided the soul, the rooster warded evil and collected spirits. Then the shaman would loudly call the patient's name. So-and-so, come back, come back. After such rituals, if the person recovered, whether due to the shaman or not, all were happy. If not cured, any excuse would do. The soul can't return now, but payment was still demanded in full. Beyond dreams and fright, the third soul departure method is peculiar. Premature exit before death. Thus, this still counts as living soul departure. In folklore, elderly often experience souls leaving before death. For example, Chim scholar Yu Yue recorded such a case in Notes from Yuxian Pavilion. A nearly centenarian woman during ancestral worship would refuse food, saying, "I just ate." When family asked what she ate, her description matched the altar offerings exactly, terrifying everyone. Her soul had left to feast with ancestor spirits. Today we recognize dementia symptoms in the elderly, but ancient tales interpreted them as soul journeys. Another living soul departure scenario involves tyrants and bullies. Records of the hidden tells of a woman touring hell, seeing her official brother hung upside down, tortured by Mingli. She exclaimed, "My sister's alive. Why is he here?" Mingli explained, "He abused power, scorned laws. Yan Wang seized his soul for punishment, with earthly retribution." Meanwhile, her brother suffered gut-wrenching pain, contorting upside down for relief, then developed festering limbs, as if sliced, mirroring his hell torment. Tyrants finally facing underworld retribution. This poetic justice satisfies. So, these are the three types of stories about living souls departing, each having its real-world significance at the time. That's exactly why they became widely popular among the people. The second key term we're discussing is soul hooking. If soul departure has exceptions for the living, then soul hooking definitely targets the souls of the dead. Since the Han and Wei dynasties, Buddhism spread to China, and the concept of the underworld gradually became deeply rooted. After death, the soul goes through a series of processes before finally descending into the underworld as a ghost. The first thing they experience is underworld officers hooking the soul, also called soul arrest, capturing the offender. When someone dies, the underworld sends ghost officers to forcibly capture their soul. Why capture it? A common explanation is that the fear of death is human instinct. If the underworld officers don't come to capture it, the soul won't go willingly. Since it's an arrest, it's naturally not polite. Besides the legendary soul-hooking register to verify identity, shackles and clubs are standard for underworld officers. The iconic setup is similar to ancient Yamen officers handling prisoners, and the humiliation and heaviness need no explanation. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, due to complex political and social reasons, many cruel punishments emerged, and underworld stories upgraded this shackled soul arrest method. PSF, BSF. In the late Ming and early Qing, Lu Qi's records of underworld retribution recorded a story. Souls had their hands shackled, chained, and the chain locked to a horse's leg. One officer rode ahead, another whipped from behind, making the soul suffer terribly. Besides shackles, there's also hair pulling in Qing stories. Since men wore queues, soul-hooking tales naturally featured hair-dragging scenes. Actually, these stories' inspirations mostly come from real life, like when the 6 gentlemen of the 100 Days Reform were arrested. They were led by their queues. Ten Sitong said, "We're scholars and officials. Why treat us like this?" The soldier replied, "This is how our yamen always handles arrests." But not all soul-hooking stories are fierce. Some involve nice rides, like in Strange Tales from a Chinese studio, where Miss Lu, who enjoyed hunting and killing in life, thanks to her lover chanting sutras for 5 years after her death, not only erased her sins but was reborn into an official family. When she departed, a super luxurious carriage came to pick her up. This is the preferential treatment for those who turn to Buddhism. BBC, letter, Twitter, order, and debt. But the story also says that for such treatment, one must chant enough sutras, specifically 5,048 volumes, the full Buddhist canon. And hearing this, some might ask, do commoners and nobles receive different treatment when their souls depart? And before the Tang dynasty, soul hooking seemed equal for both commoners and elites. As recorded in Ganbao's In Search of the Supernatural from Eastern Jin, death levels all distinctions of status. Zhang Zu's Tang-era Records of Court and Country describes a ghost seeing doctor witnessing Minister Zhu Yunyuan's soul being dragged by his hair during Wu Zetian's reign. 2 underworld officers beat him with clubs, proof that even high officials received no special treatment after death. But post-Tang stories show officials received vastly different treatment when entering the underworld. While common souls were taken via register, officials required special vermilion written soul summoning plaques. Though still death, the protocol resembled an invitation. Some even had ceremonial processions mirroring their earthly grandeur. Folk witchcraft claimed not only to summon souls away, but also recall lost ones, known as soul summoning. King records describe Yin County's custom. For chronic mental illness, shamans performed soul summoning with ritual animals and the patient's clothes wrapped on a rooster. Clothes guided the soul. The rooster ward off evil. Then the shaman would loudly call, "Left name, come back! Come back!" If the person recovered, regardless of the shaman's role, all rejoiced. If not cured, any excuse sufficed. The soul can't return. But full payment was still demanded. Beyond dreams and fright, the third soul departure method is peculiar. Premature exit before physical death. Thus, this still counts as a living person's soul departure. In folk tales, elderly people often experience souls leaving before death. For example, Qing scholar Yu Yue recorded such a case in Notes from Yushan Pavilion. A nearly centenarian woman during ancestral worship would refuse food, saying, "I just ate!" Her family asked, "What did you eat then?" Her description matched the altar offerings exactly, shocking everyone. Her soul had left to feast with ancestral spirits. Today we recognize dementia symptoms in the elderly, but ancient tales interpreted them as soul journeys. Another living soul departure scenario involves tyrants. Donling continued records tells of a woman touring hell, seeing her official brother hung upside down, tortured by Mingli with Lingqi. She cried, "My brother's alive! Why here?" Mingli explained. He abused power. Yan Wang seized his soul for punishment, with earthly retribution. Meanwhile, her brother suffered gut-wrenching pain, contorting upside down for relief, then developed festering limbs, as if sliced, mirroring his hell torment. Tyrants facing underworld retribution satisfies our sense of justice. These three living soul departure types each held contemporary significance. That's why they spread widely among the people. Our second key term is soul hooking. Unlike living soul exceptions, this targets only the dead. Since Han Wei dynasties, Buddhism popularized underworld concepts in China. After death, souls undergo processes before becoming underworld ghosts. The first thing they experience is underworld officers hooking the soul, also called soul arrest, capturing the offender. When someone dies, the underworld sends ghost officers to forcibly capture their soul. Why capture it? One common explanation is that clinging to life and fearing death is human instinct. If the underworld officers don't come to capture it, the soul won't go willingly. Ha! Since it's an arrest, it's naturally not polite. Besides the legendary soul hooking register to verify identity, shackles and clubs are standard equipment for underworld officers. The setup resembles ancient yamen officers handling prisoners. The humiliation and heaviness need no explanation. During Ming-Qing dynasties, complex socio-political reasons spawned cruel punishments, and underworld stories upgraded this shackled soul arrest method. Luqi's late Ming Records of Underworld Retribution describe souls' shackled hands, chained to horses. One officer riding ahead, another whipping behind, causing terrible suffering. Besides shackles, Qing-era stories featured queue pulling since men wore braids, naturally inspiring hair-dragging scenes. These stories drew inspiration from reality, like when the 6 gentlemen of 1998, Reform, were arrested by their queues. Tan Sitong protested, "We're scholars and officials, why this treatment?" The soldier replied, "This is how our yamen handles arrests." But not all soul hooking is fierce. Some get luxury rides, like in Strange Tales, where Miss Liu, who hunted excessively, after her lover's 5-year sutra chanting, had sins erased and was reborn into nobility. When departing, a luxurious carriage fetched her. Preferential treatment for Buddhist converts. But the story specifies such treatment requires chanting 5,048 sutra volumes, the full Buddhist canon. Hearing this, some ask, do commoners and elites receive different treatment when departing? Before Tang Dynasty, soul hooking seemed equal for commoners and nobles alike. As Ganbao's Eastern Jin in Search of the Supernatural states, death levels all status distinctions. Tang Dynasty, Zhang Zuo's Records of Court and Country documents. During Wu Zetian's reign, a ghost-seeing doctor witnessed Minister Zhu Yuanyan's soul being dragged by his hair by an underworld officer. 2 other officers beat him with clubs. Proof that even powerful officials received no special treatment after death. The post-Tang stories show officials received vastly different treatment when entering the underworld. While common souls were taken via register, officials required special vermilion-inscribed soul-summoning plaques. Though still death, the protocol resembled an invitation. Some even had ceremonial processions mirroring their earthly grandeur. As the saying goes, never enter the palace empty-handed. Sufficient bribes could persuade officers to release souls. Tao Qian's sequel to In Search of the Supernatural tells of Li Chu from Shangyang. After dying of illness, he sat up during his wake and took his wife's gold bracelet before dying again. At dawn, Li Chu's body warmed and he revived. He explained, seeing another bribe officers with jewelry, he bargained to retrieve his wife's bracelet, causing the bracelet snatching incident. Though given in the underworld, the physical bracelet remained untouched in the living world. His wife, terrified, buried it. Advance bribes could sometimes prevent death entirely. As recorded in Tang Renchengyan's Records of Gambling, an officer demanded a rhinoceros horn ornament in Li Kuanji's dream, so Li had one drawn and burned it with paper money. The officer then revealed, "You were to drown soon, but your cooperation saves you." But such underworld secret leaking carried high risks and might not be fulfilled. Moreover, misunderstandings could arise between mortal and underworld realms. Duan Chengxi's Tang era Miscellaneous Morsels from Yuyang tells of Li Hezi treating his arresting officers to a meal and burning 400,000 paper notes, earning a reluctant 3-year life extension. But 3 days later, Li Hezi still died. Turns out 3 years in ghost terms meant 3 human days. People believe money buys ghostly favors, but ghosts have their limits. Compared to this, bending rules for human compassion, especially when sparing good people, feels more acceptable. For instance, Zhu Yunming's Records of the Strange describes Hua Lao Chai, a Wuxi philanthropist who saw his deceased tenant enter his home. The tenant said, "After death I became an underworld officer. I'm here to collect your soul among 50 others. Take this month to settle affairs before departing peacefully." All right, that concludes part 2. Ultimately, these soul-hooking tales were fabrications by ancient people reflecting societal realities and needs. But despite strict underworld procedures, mistakes happen. So what then? The wrongfully taken soul must be returned to revive the body. Our third key term is soul return. Before Hanwei dynasties, Buddhism hadn't reached China, and underworld concepts were absent in folklore. Soul return stories were seen as cosmic warnings, like eclipses or earthquakes, foretelling political upheaval. Example, History of Han 5 Elements. Records Zhao Chun reviving 6 days post-death during Emperor Ping's reign. This occurred in late Eastern Han, seen as an omen, foretelling Wang Mang's usurpation of the throne. After Buddhism's arrival, Chinese underworld culture transformed, becoming tools for Buddhist proselytizing. For over a millennium, most soul return stories followed one template: souls discovering underworld errors and reviving. Soul return typically stemmed from mistaken identity, similar or identical names causing wrongful captures. Ganbao's In Search of the Supernatural describes Jia Wenhei's wrongful capture. Yan Wine's court found 10 others sharing his name, 10 mistaken deaths that day. In many soul return stories, mistaken deaths seem intentional by the underworld. It's all about finding a human spokesperson to promote its operations and core values, thus educating society. And, you know, uh, uh, for instance, Yujian Ji tells a story where they meant to capture Zhang Lin with the forest character, but mistakenly took his neighbor Zhang Lin with the neighbor character who still had 18 years of life left. Oh. And after discovering the mistake, Yang Long said to Zhang Lin, "You look like a virtuous man. You must chant Buddhist scriptures often in the human world." Zhang Lin felt warm inside and replied, "Yes, I often silently chant scriptures like Gaoam Jing and Guanyin Jing." Yang Wang said, "Good. Good people always get rewarded. I'll send someone to take you back to live for more years." Then before leaving, he was shown hell, witnessing ghosts, suffering punishments for their sins. After returning to the living world, Xinglin accumulated more virtue and good deeds than before. Some stories even give a noble excuse for the underworld's mistaken captures. And, for example, Mingbao Ji recounts a woman from Xianyang, Madame Liang, who revived after 7 days, claiming she was mistakenly captured. She should have been released, but officials found she had a sharp tongue and loved quarreling. So they decided to teach her a lesson. An underworld officer took a big axe and chopped her tongue for 7 days before sending her back. After reviving, Madame Liang's tongue swelled up, and she never dared to quarrel or curse again. Thus, the story served to educate people. Another view is that the underworld seemingly captures souls by mistake, but actually to have them do tasks. Once done, they're released. In Dai Fu Guan Yi Ji, there's a story about a 9-year-old child mistakenly captured by the underworld. The officer told him to capture a dog's soul, giving him a poison pill to feed the dog. After completing the task, the child was released. If the underworld finds such temporary workers useful, they'll often invite them back. Those chosen by the underworld become intermediaries between the living world and the underworld. People in the living world who want to pull strings or use backdoors with the underworld must rely on them. Of course, their services aren't free. Each trip to the underworld fattens their wallets.
Anyway, if the underworld discovers a wrongful capture, it's best to return the soul quickly.
If delayed too long, the body decays, causing extra complications. If that happens, the soul must possess another body, what we call borrowing a corpse for rebirth. And in Underworld Tales, corpse borrowing is arranged by underworld authorities, not random. Standard procedure. Yan Long discovers someone died before their lifespan ended, but their body is ruined, so they find a freshly dead body for rebirth. Thus, Zhang San's soul legitimately occupies Li Si's body. Like in Journey to the West, peasant Li Quilian hanged herself, but Yang Long found she had immortal lifespan. Her body decayed, while Emperor Taizong's sister Li Yuwing was due to die suddenly. Yan Wang ordered officers to use Li Yuying's body for Li Quilian's rebirth, instantly transforming a peasant's wife into imperial royalty. Generally, the soul gains everything in this corpse exchange. But some bizarre stories feature souls unhappy with their borrowed bodies, like complaining about ugliness. Guan Yiji records a late Eastern Jin man who died suddenly, discovered as an underworld error. His feet had rotted, just as a foreigner died suddenly. The foreigner was hideous, especially his feet, but time forced the man to accept. After revival, seeing the dark, hairy, foul-smelling feet, he wept bitterly. These stories suggest underworld body assignments aren't random, introducing karmic justice themes, creating accelerated reincarnation with full memory for moral lessons. This covers most of the book's content. As ancients said, life has constraints, death has no taboos. But in Chinese underworld lore, death brings underworld rules and tortures. True freedom belongs only to spirits between life and death. Though adrift, at least they're temporarily free from the rules of both realms. Even if occasionally facing violent enforcement by underworld officers, they still possess the freedom to move between yin and yang. So you see, stories about spirits are essentially human stories. These spirits, temporarily detached from both realms, embody the wishes and ideals of the living. And all right, that concludes our interpretation of the book, Speaking of Spirits. Reading notes are below the audio. We'll see you next time.